Hey guys, Tim here, Big Dog Forge. Welcome back to the shop. It's good to see you again. This time around, more of the rusty Damascus from the document 1824. So let's jump right in. I'll show you what this is about, and we'll see you at the other end. Stick with me, guys. Should be fun. All right, guys, kind of the same old thing. We're going to use these barrel bands again, and the reason I am is they're good and rusty. They are a mild steel, basically. And we're using some of the parts, a few of the lines out of this document that talk about making blades. So I'm going to put some of that together and just test a few things using these barrel bands. They don't really talk about making blades out of barrel bands. It's a little ambiguous, so I will leave a link at the end of the video to this document. You can read it yourself and kind of make up your own mind. Anyway, they talked about using cast iron powder. So we're going to get a bunch of drill shavings from this piece of cast iron, and we're going to powder it. I'll put it on a piece of this. This is actually 15N20. It's a piece of sawmill blade. And clean that off. And I've got a piece of stainless steel, but it uses sort of a pestle. So we got a little mortar pestle situation going here, and we'll crush this stuff up. And I was able to get about 1/8 of a pound. It really doesn't take that much of this dust to make quite a bit of weight, so it's really not a whole bunch, but we're going to put about 20% borax in and see if that's about right. So they talk about sprinkling or putting a layer of cast iron powder mixed with borax between the layers of metal you're using to make your blade, and then bundling them and putting them into the fire. And I'm sure what their goal there is to impart more carbon into the steel, probably. Or like many modern smiths, using powdered steel and borax as just as a flux. Now you can see that cast iron sort of sparkling out the front of the forge there. It's pretty dramatic sparks coming out of the end of that, and I'm sure a lot of that was some of the cast iron and a lot of that flux coming out. So after our initial weld, we're going to take off the MIG welds that we put on the side, try to keep any of that inclusion out of this billet. We want a good honest test here, and really what we're going for is just an experiment. I want to see how the cast iron reacts. I want to see what the rust and the cast iron do to one another. I want to see how well this goes before I invest too much time and effort and into actually following their little recipe. And there's some things that I cannot do. So we've got quite a few welds and folds to go through here. I'll just let you watch those and talk a little bit about the things that they were able to do that I am not able to do. They talk about using nothing but charcoal from light wood as a fuel. They won't use coal. They made that very clear. And I've either got coal or propane. And a big part of the secret here is reducing fire as much as you can, and it's really difficult to kind of reach that in a propane forge. But if you get the heat up high enough in the forge, you tend to burn off a lot of the oxygen. So I wouldn't call it a reducing fire, but a little closer to that. And I could do this in my coal forge, but honestly, I don't have enough coal around here to accomplish this. And it's difficult to get a hold of where I'm at. So we're cutting and folding this. Ultimately, we'll come up with 320 layers. So you probably noticed that I'm using the power hammer to obviously cut the billet with my little makeshift tool here in preparation for folding it over. I'm using the same cast iron and borax mix to flux these with, and I'm setting the initial weld with the power hammer and then moving over to the forge press for the next weld. And I'm putting 2 welds on each one of these as I fold them, and they seem to be doing quite well. And that particular progression of power hammer to forge press seems to be working the best for this particular material in this situation. I'm also keeping the forge at quite a high temperature. It's right around 2400 degrees. And the thing that I'm fighting here that's causing me a lot of problems actually is I recently rebuilt the forge. I relined it, and I did not have any fire brick when I started this particular build, so I grabbed some old chimney bricks that are stacked outside the shop here and put them in front of the forge, and they seem to melt right around 2200 degrees. So they melted into this sort of ceramic goo puddle in the floor of the forge. And as I'm putting my billet in there, I have to be very careful that none of that is getting caught in between the welding surfaces as I'm working this. So it's presenting a little bit of a problem. So far I've been able to either clean it off or make sure that it's not gotten in there. But it is getting progressively worse as we go along here and proceed forward. But we can deal with it. And we got stuck on the die there, and the handle was coming off. My tongs I was using were large enough I could just grab the billet. And in this process here, I'm going to be forging this out into a 1 1/4 inch square bar, and we're going to put a twist in it just to see what it does, what it looks like, what the laminations look like, that kind of thing. There's really no reason. They do talk about twisting the material in this document, but not like this. This is just me looking for a little more interesting pattern out of this, if we get a pattern out of this. But it does pose a problem. It'll give you cold shuts. It'll, you lose a little bit of material. You have to forge it down a little narrower. So what I'm going to do here, for a couple of reasons, we're going to forge this down to just about 1 inch thick, 3/4 of an inch thick. We're going to cut it in half. I'm going to clean one side to get rid of any cold shuts, any debris out of the forge. And we'll MIG weld it back together just like that, and we will continue forging with this. Now, we had a little bit too much of the debris from the forge on it for me to feel comfortable just hot cutting it and folding it. That brick is just causing me a serious problem, and unfortunately I'm going to have to reline that forge again. It's only been relined for 2 days, so but it's all good. I knew that there was a possibility of this happening, so my bad. Okay, we're going to forge this thing down into about 1/2 inch thick, 2 inches wide, and what we're going to do is only use the front half of this bar. We're going to go ahead and cut it in half and get it down into something that's workable. We'll save the other half for, I don't know, some other project sometime. And we'll refine this guy down into a billet that can be used to make something with. All right, so this is a piece that we're going to be using. You can see on the sides there that it still had some of those little cold shuts from the twist. I went ahead and ground those off. You can see how it's a little uneven. And then we ground the faces down to make sure there weren't any cracks or inclusions. And now we're going to narrow it up to match a piece of 1084 flat bar that I have. And this is something they do talk about in this document, is where they take a piece of steel and put it between two pieces of more mild steel or iron to make a blade strong and flexible, that kind of thing. So we're going to do that. Again, not following that document to the letter or anything. I'm just doing a little sand my with this. And you can kind of see a pattern starting to emerge from the heat there. It's kind of interesting. So if someone does want to make a blade out of it at some point, at least they'll have a consistent core. Let me get this thing straightened up, and we're going to get it back on the surface grinder again. We're going to clean up the faces, and just one face, and prepare it for welding to the 1084 core. And I'm going to clean up the sides after that's welded together, so that we can keep an eye on how thick the outside layers are, and that we're not grinding too close to that 1084 core. And like I said, the reason I'm doing this is if there was someone that wanted to make this thing into a knife eventually, then they would have a nice solid core. And it is something that they do describe in this little document that I'm following. So like I said, I am not doing a historical reenactment. I'm simply pulling some lines from this document. I'm testing and trying out different things before I actually jump in and try to mimic anything that they've done. Now you can see where I've cleaned up the side of that billet, and we've cleaned both faces, and we're going to get it into some vinegar here. And I'll give you some time frames, and we'll take a look at it. Now this is at 12 hours of soaking in distilled white vinegar. And they talk about 1 to 5 days. So we'll get it back into the vinegar, and we'll bring it back out at 24 hours. There we go. This is 24 hours. So this is 1 day. And it's looking pretty interesting. I really like the way this looks. This is odd. It's surprising that you get that much contrast out of a bunch of mild steel that's rusty with some cast iron powder between the layers. But there you go. So I'm going to get this back into the vinegar, and I will see you in the office. All right, guys, there you go. I put it right back into the vinegar. We're going to give it about 5 days, see what it looks like, and I will leave a link in the description below to the document so that you guys can take a look at it, get from it what you want, what you think, and let me know what you think of it. Read through it, and we're going to get to a point, and I'm actually going to follow one of their descriptions. Right now I'm just doing some testing and some kind of trial and error stuff. So anyway, guys, thanks for dropping by Big Dog Forge. Really appreciate it. Think about it. Like, share, subscribe. It'd be a good thing. Would make me smile. That's always good, right? All right, guys, take care of yourselves. Be safe, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye now.